Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. Just got back to my hotel room after Tottenham's magnificent, let's be honest, victory over Eintracht Frankfurt. A really gutsy display from Ange Postecoglou's side, which showed a lot of characteristics which they've been lacking this season in a lot of games. A kind of performance that I think a lot of people didn't really think his team were capable of, to be honest, given some of the performances they've had in the league, and one that will give all fans renewed belief that maybe they can go all the way in the Europa League this season. It was a really committed, mature performance out here and at the Deutsche Bank Park, which is Frankfurt Stadium. And for those of you who weren't there, I don't know how much it came across on the TV, but it is a hostile atmosphere. I remember it from the last time I was here with Tottenham. The noise that the home fans crank up is relentless. It's very authentic. We were talking about this with one of my colleagues about how sometimes, and to be honest, even Spurs maybe are guilty of this, with trying to sort of almost artificially generate a bit of an atmosphere. You definitely get it a lot more in England. In Germany, I don't think, maybe it's to do with the fact that prices are right down low and it's not pricing out your sort of the earth fans perhaps, but it feels really genuine and the noise is just it's created is really intimidating. But Tottenham handled it really well. They weathered an early storm. There were a few hairy moments particularly with Hugo Ekitike, who really does look a fantastic player, albeit a bit of a diver, to be fair, in the second half, but a real threat throughout. And there was one particular moment early on where he was racing through, and were it not for an absolutely brilliant last-ditch tackle from the excellent Mickey van der Ven, I thought Van der Ven was back to his best tonight, then maybe they would have gone 1-0 down pretty early and it could have been a different story. But Spurs did what I think, again, they've been sort of lacking at times this season. They showed a sort of nous, a sort of smart approach to the game where they tried to slow it down when they had the opportunity. Every time Vicario got the ball, he took his time, and they were clever. They knew it was going to be, it could be in for the long haul. Obviously, it didn't go to 120 minutes, but the possibility was there of that happening, and they were just committed. None more so than James Madison for what proved to be the goal that won the game. And I thought that moment with Madison, where basically he goes up for a header and he gets cleaned out by the goalkeeper, which leads to a penalty, sort of really, for me, kind of, if he had any doubts over whether these players were still playing for the manager, that in a nutshell, that moment would have dispelled those doubts, because a player in that situation who knows he's about to get absolutely clattered and could be in serious pain. Let's be honest, he came off after a couple of minutes. He couldn't carry on because of it. Postecoglou afterwards said he was fine, but if you're not 100% committed to what's going on here, I think you duck out of that challenge. Madison didn't at all. He went straight back into it and took the hit, won the penalty, which was pretty astounding. It wasn't given instantly, that the referee had to consult his touchline monitor on advice from VAR. Eventually made the right decision. But yeah, that was the key moment. And then from there, Dominic Solanke picks up the ball. Originally, Matisse Tell picked up the ball, presumably keen to add another penalty to his one he scored against Southampton recently. But he then handed it to Solanke, and you're thinking, I was nervous. And it's funny, I don't think I've been as nervous about a game in a long time, and I'm not even a Tottenham fan. I guess I'm invested in this Spurs story, and particularly the Postecoglou story, so that it sort of takes you over, doesn't it? And you just sort of really feel it, and particularly in night games like that, big games like that, when you're writing match reports and you're worried about having to change it in the last minute and all that kind of thing. But it was really just, I don't know, I just had a sense of really wanting them to do well and for him to do well, given the situation he was in. And Solanke stepping up, having not scored for 11 games prior to this one, so he was on his 12th game without a goal. The only other goal came in 2025, came 4th of January against Newcastle. You were thinking, wow, this is a nervy moment. He has quite a short run up as well, which always makes me more nervous. But then what did any fan or any neutral who was invested in the game have to worry about when he sends the keeper the wrong way, dispatches it brilliantly, and then goes off to celebrate in front of the Frankfurt fans, like the really ardent sort of ultras, which seemed to spark a bit of a tempest flaring, actually, to be honest, both on and off the pitch, in the stands and on the pitch. Throughout the game, there was some pretty committed tackles. At one point, just before half time, Brennan Johnson had a bit of a naughty tackle on one of their players, which led to him being booked, but also one of Dino Topmüller, the Frankfurt manager's assistants, being sent off. Not sure what happened there. Kind of seems a bit irrelevant in the fullness of the game, but there were quite a few sort of set twos throughout the game where a bit of shoving matches, an absolutely wild Romero tackle right at the end, which he got booked for. But the good news is I think Bentancur got booked as well for a pretty cynical tackle, but I believe no one's got suspended from Tottenham's camp. All the other cards get wiped now, so Ali Gold told me as I'm getting off the tram, going into the semi-finals. Although, crucially, I just read something on social media, I'd have to check it if it's definitely true, but that Bodo Glimt, who's obviously the next opponents now in the semi-final, have got 3 players suspended for the next game as a result of suspensions tonight against Lazio. So Spurs are in a good position. And I thought, from looking at the personal performances, so just to finish off on Solanke, took his goal really well. Hopefully that can be massive for him and confidence, because he's obviously been really lacking when it comes to scoring goals. I thought Matisse Tel, wide left, had his moments, had a nice shot in the first half and he looked dangerous. Not too often this season the forward players haven't looked dangerous enough, but he was good. But the real sort of stars of the show, I thought, were Van de Ven, as I said before, but particularly Destiny Udogie. But Destiny Udogie was fantastic. I think he's had a poor season all round, and he's obviously been injury disrupted season, given how good he was in the first season. But Ange, bigged him up a lot after the first leg where he thought he was excellent. I thought he was quite good in that game. But here he was brilliant. He was just everywhere. He was getting Spurs out of trouble consistently. Just really back to his best, and really vindicated Ange's decision to pick him over Jed Spence. I just feel like Ange's favoured back four is this back four. Not to say that Jed Spence doesn't have a part to play, that he didn't here, but had Spurs been in a difficult situation, I could definitely have seen where they needed a goal. Ange definitely would have turned to Spence. I think he sees him as a crucial member of the squad now, and one of his go-to guys when he's trying to create a goal, definitely. But it wasn't needed here, luckily. And Udogie defensively was really, really good. And if Madison really epitomised and embodied that commitment and desire to put their bodies on the line that Spurs showed tonight with that incident for the penalty, then I think Udogie wasn't far behind with just where he was constantly. Having said that, there were, as I said, I don't know if I mentioned this already, there were some hairy moments. I mean, Rasmus Christensen, to be fair, wasn't really good enough for Leeds. So I guess a bit of perspective should be had here that Frankfurt aren't a great team. Ekitike looks a top player, and I'd be surprised if Frankfurt kept hold of him. But they also lost Mario Götze, who he might be 32 now, the man who scored the winner in the World Cup final in 2014. But it sounds like him and Ekitike have struck up quite a partnership in recent weeks. And for him to sort of limp off with a hamstring injury after 18 minutes was quite a boost, to be honest, from Spurs' point of view. And they sort of lacked a bit of quality, I'd say, the home side after that. But they still had chances. I mean, Rasmus Christensen, he's a fullback, and he showed it when he had 3 good opportunities towards the end of the game and missed them all. So it's not like Spurs didn't have to sort of survive some hairy moments. But I think they deserved it. I think they deserved any kind of luck they got. And what I liked about this performance, and this is kind of where I meant when I talk about it being a mature performance, I liked that it was quite low risk. There are too many times, for my money, where watching Ange's Spurs, they take too many risks, whether it's dodgy pass, risky passes out from the back, and I know that's how he wants to play, and he sees the upside from it, but so often they seem to mess it up that it seems not worth the risk. Didn't see much of that at all today. Like Van de Ven was whacking it long when he needed to. It was just a bit more of a savvy performance. And that's not, and I think I've been consistent throughout the whole time Ange's here, that you don't have to throw out all your principles. You just need to adapt and tweak and change it a little bit when it comes to certain situations. And I wish he'd done it more often, to be honest. I mean, I know it sounds simple and it sounds like I'm sort of preaching, but there are times when I really feel like they could have done that more often. they would have put themselves in a better position. But tonight, they got it absolutely spot on. They brought their most committed, mature performance of the Postecoglou tenure just when he needed it most. Make no mistake, had they lost tonight, personally, I do think he would have been gone after this. I think there was a good chance, at least, of that happening. And that may still be the case come the end of the season, even if he wins the Europa League. I mean, I'm now thinking, if they could go and win the Europa League, I mean, the mood could be such a transformative. And I think the tone will be different now. I mean, I know a lot of people have been, the video I did before this game, the sort of suggestion that the media's our questions were too negative ahead of this game. I see what you're saying, but really, as I sort of explained in that video, I feel like the story really was about Ange's future at this point. It's going to be, I think, frog in my throat. I think the narrative will change a bit ahead of the semi-final because you're one game away, or two ties away from. I seem to have developed Ange's cough here. 2 ties away from a final, and we know how big that can be. So I think it will be more about the opportunity knocking rather than his particular future at that point, really. But we'll see, I suppose, on that front. On to Ange's comments after the game. He said that he was obviously delighted. He said the team had to work hard to be really disciplined. It's obviously what they were. He felt they were deserved to go through on the 2 legs, and I couldn't agree more. I thought they were good in the first leg, but they didn't do enough. Maybe got a bit unlucky where they didn't score those chances, but they didn't ultimately. And they knew they had to go and put in a hell of a performance in a hostile environment here, and they went and did it, and they deserved it, I think. He said Madison was fine, as I said, but he held his unbelievable courage for that particular incident. He couldn't understand why it went to VAR, why the referee didn't give a penalty initially, and he thought it was a red card. And then he had some nice sort of insight into his feelings around the whole situation and how he felt like the team and the staff have never splintered, which is actually a message he's been quite consistent with throughout all his difficulties and his trials and tribulations this season. He's always felt like there's been a togetherness within the squad, even when it's been going badly. And that's kind of what I was talking about with Madison's sort of embodiment of that togetherness and that commitment in that one action with the goalkeeper. But the overall performance really did suggest a team that was really playing for their manager still and was still very much together. And that's what Ange said, and he said that's given him heart all along throughout this process. He did. I was in the mix zone talking to Dominic Solanke and Guillermo Vicario, so I wasn't actually in the press conference. So I only sort of picked up the quotes later from the guys, but it does sound like he had a little bit of a shot at his critics and maybe even people in the media in the press conference room at the end, where he said, the quote was, "Unfortunately for a lot of you, you're going to have to put up with me for a little bit longer." He said before that he pretty much reads most things, or it's known that he does read most stuff that's out there. So he'll be very well aware of the narrative around this game and the stories about his future and the questions that came up in the original press conference. So a bit of a dig back there, but fair enough. We have the right to ask these questions. He has the right to answer them in any way he wants, and he also has the right to have a pop back when things are going well, I suppose. But a really good night for Ange Postecoglou. He must be relieved deep down. He must be relieved. I know he's been saying about how he doesn't care, he couldn't care less, but I think it must get to anyone. The sort of pressure that's been put upon him and all the sort of noise around it, of which I'm well aware that I and other people, parts of the media, are contributing factors to that. But that's the nature of the game, and there's only one way to turn it around. I said this before the game. The only one way to turn around the narrative is to start winning games. And if you win games like this in the manner that they did, that is the first step to a big change. And congratulations, really, for the team and the manager for doing it. Bodo Glimt next. I haven't really had time properly to look through much about them, apart from book my flights to get them sorted. Obviously, the first leg is at home again, just like this one in this round, which is unfortunate, to be honest, on May the 1st. So you think they'll have to go in with a good result, a win, hopefully, from the first leg to set them up for the second leg. But then again, They came away here, so they have proved they can do it. As Ange said in his quotes, when all his team is back, they've got a pretty compelling case for beating anyone. It'll be a long way off. I think it's not far from the Arctic Circle, actually. The Norwegian champions, who seem to have picked up some decent results this season, not least getting through on penalties against Lazio. They almost feel like they obviously won the first leg 2-0. They lost the second leg 3-1, had to go to penalties, so they had to really dig it out. But Spurs really should be going into that game, feeling like they can win it. They will be favourites, and I wouldn't be surprised at this rate if we end up playing Man United in the final. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just enjoy what's been a really good night for Tottenham and Ange Postecoglou, and see if they can build from here, starting with Forest on Monday. Anyway, cheers guys.